Tragic mass shootings have left deep scars on communities worldwide, forever changing the lives of victims and survivors. In this video, we continue our look at some of the deadliest mass shootings in history, examining the devastating events that shocked the world. From public places to schools and workplaces, these tragedies serve as grim reminders of the importance of safety, awareness, and the ongoing conversations surrounding gun violence and mental health. Join us as we explore these heartbreaking events, remembering the lives lost and the lasting impact these incidents have had on society. The Pulse nightclub shooting remains one of the deadliest mass tragedies in modern U.S. history. What began as a night of music, dancing, and celebration turned into a nightmare that claimed innocent lives and left the nation in shock. On June 12, 2016, Pulse, a popular LGBTQ+ nightclub in Orlando, Florida, was packed with people enjoying their night. Suddenly, just after 2 a.m. a gunman entered the club and opened fire. Panic spread as people tried desperately to escape. The attacker, later identified as Omar Mateen, took hostages and engaged in a standoff with law enforcement that lasted for hours. By the time the ordeal was over, 49 people had lost their lives, and more than 50 others were injured. The tragedy sent shockwaves across the world, sparking discussions about gun control, hate crimes, and public safety. In the aftermath, the Pulse nightclub became a symbol of resilience and unity. Vigils were held worldwide, and efforts to support the victims' families poured in. Today, the site stands as a memorial to those who were taken too soon, ensuring that their memories live on. The Sutherland Springs church shooting was one of the deadliest mass shootings in Texas history. What was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday service turned into a horrific tragedy that shook the entire nation. On the morning of November 5, 2017, the congregation of the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, gathered for worship. Just after 11 a.m. a gunman, later identified as Devin Patrick Kelly, approached the church and began firing from outside before entering the building and continuing his attack. Within minutes, 26 people had lost their lives, including children and elderly worshippers, while 22 others were seriously injured. The attack sent shockwaves across the country, leading to debates about gun control, background checks, and security in places of worship. After leaving the church, Kelly was confronted by a local resident, Stephen Williford, who engaged him in a gunfight. Kelly fled the scene in his vehicle, but after a high-speed chase, he crashed and took his own life before law enforcement could apprehend him. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the small town of Sutherland Springs came together in mourning and resilience. The First Baptist Church was later turned into a memorial, honoring the victims and serving as a reminder of the strength and unity of the community. The San Ysidro McDonald's massacre remains one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. What began as an ordinary summer afternoon turned into a horrific tragedy that left an entire community in mourning. On July 18, 1984, in San Ysidro, California, a quiet McDonald's restaurant filled with families, children, and workers became the site of unimaginable horror. At approximately 3:40 p.m., 41-year-old James Huberty, armed with multiple firearms, entered the restaurant and opened fire without warning. For 77 minutes, he carried out a brutal attack, taking the lives of 21 innocent people and injuring 19 others before being fatally shot by a police sniper. The victims included men, women, and children, some as young as 4 months old. The tragedy sent shockwaves across the country and raised serious concerns about public safety and gun violence. In the aftermath, the McDonald's restaurant was demolished, and a memorial was built in honor of the victims. The massacre also led to changes in police response tactics for active shooter situations, helping to prevent similar incidents in the future. The Edmond post office shooting was one of the first major workplace massacres in U.S. history and a tragic event that introduced the phrase "going postal" into popular culture. It was a horrifying reminder of the dangers of unchecked workplace stress and mental health struggles. On the morning of August 20, 1986, in Edmond, Oklahoma, 44-year-old Patrick Sherrill, a postal worker with a history of conflicts with his supervisors, arrived at the post office armed with 2 handguns. In just 15 minutes, he unleashed a wave of terror, fatally shooting 14 co-workers and injuring 6 others before turning the gun on himself. The massacre sent shockwaves across the country and led to a national discussion about workplace violence and mental health awareness. The U.S. Postal Service later implemented changes to improve employee well-being, but the phrase "going postal," a grim reference to the tragedy, became ingrained in American culture. On October 25, 2023, Lewiston, Maine, experienced a tragic mass shooting that resulted in the deaths of 18 individuals and injuries to 13 others. The incident began at Just-in-Time Recreation, a local bowling alley, during a youth league event. The assailant, 40-year-old Robert Card, entered the establishment armed with a Ruger SFAR.308 semi-automatic rifle and commenced firing, leading to multiple fatalities and injuries. Shortly thereafter, Card proceeded to Skeemangee's Bar and Grill restaurant, approximately 4 miles away, where he continued his attack, resulting in additional casualties. Following an extensive 49-hour manhunt, authorities discovered Card deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound near a recycling center in Lisbon, Maine, where he had been recently employed. Subsequent examinations revealed that Card had suffered traumatic brain injuries, likely due to his 8-year tenure as a grenade instructor, which involved repeated exposure to blasts. This tragic event stands as the deadliest mass shooting in Maine's history and the 10th deadliest in U.S. history. The Aurora Theater shooting remains one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, turning a night of entertainment into a scene of horror. On July 20, 2012, moviegoers in Aurora, Colorado, gathered for a midnight premiere of The Dark Knight Rises. The theater was packed with excited fans when, just after the movie began, a heavily armed individual dressed in tactical gear entered the theater and began firing indiscriminately. The attacker, later identified as James Holmes, used multiple firearms, including a semi-automatic rifle, to unleash chaos in the darkened theater. Within minutes, 12 people had lost their lives, and 70 others were injured. Holmes attempted to flee but was arrested by police outside the theater without resistance. During the investigation, authorities discovered that he had booby-trapped his apartment with explosives, indicating that the attack had been meticulously planned. The tragedy sparked intense debates about gun control, mental health, and public safety in the U.S. In 2015, Holmes was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The 2009 Fort Hood shooting remains one of the deadliest attacks on a U.S. military base, leaving the nation in shock and mourning. On November 5, 2009, soldiers and personnel at Fort Hood, a military base in Texas, were going about their daily routines when suddenly gunfire erupted inside the Soldier Readiness Processing Center. The shooter, later identified as Major Nidal Hassan, an Army psychiatrist, opened fire on unarmed soldiers who were preparing for deployment. In a matter of minutes, 13 people were killed, including a pregnant soldier, and over 30 others were injured. Chaos and panic filled the room as people scrambled for cover, while some tried to stop the attacker. Hassan was eventually confronted and shot by military police officers, leaving him paralyzed. He was later convicted and sentenced to death in 2013. The Fort Hood shooting raised concerns about security on military bases and the mental health of service members. It was later revealed that Hassan had shown warning signs of extremist beliefs before the attack, leading to criticism of the military's failure to intervene earlier. The Santif High School shooting was a heartbreaking tragedy that once again highlighted the devastating impact of school violence in the United States. On the morning of May 18, 2018, students and teachers at Santa Fe High School in Texas were starting what seemed like an ordinary school day. But shortly after 7:30 a.m. gunfire erupted inside an art classroom. The shooter, later identified as 17-year-old Demetrius Pagortsis, was a student at the school. Armed with a shotgun and a revolver, he moved through the halls, targeting classmates and teachers. Within minutes, 10 people, 8 students and 2 teachers, had lost their lives, while 13 others were injured. Chaos unfolded as students ran for safety, while law enforcement rushed to stop the attack. After a standoff, Pagortsis surrendered to police and was taken into custody. Investigations later revealed that he had posted disturbing messages online before the attack, raising concerns about warning signs that might have been overlooked. The Santa Fe shooting reignited national debates on school safety, gun laws, and mental health support for students. The victims' families and the community came together in mourning, vowing to push for change and ensure that no other school has to experience such a tragedy. The Luby shooting was one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history at the time and left an entire community in grief and shock. On October 16, 1991, the quiet town of Killeen, Texas, experienced unimaginable horror. During lunchtime at a Luby's cafeteria, the restaurant was filled with families, workers, and elderly patrons enjoying their meals. Suddenly, a pickup truck crashed through the front window, and moments later, the driver, 35-year-old George Hennard, stepped out armed with 2 pistols. Without hesitation, he began shooting indiscriminately, targeting innocent diners. Over the next 10 minutes, he took the lives of 23 people and injured 27 others in what was, at the time, the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. Hennard's attack only ended when police arrived and exchanged fire with him. He ultimately took his own life before being apprehended. The tragedy led to significant changes in gun laws, including the push for concealed carry legislation in Texas. One survivor, Susanna Hupp, lost both of her parents in the attack and later became a strong advocate for gun rights, playing a key role in the passage of new self-defense laws.